team of people that we've put together over at Skybox Studios is fairly diverse. There's myself, who I'm an engineer and a producer, and I work primarily with live musicians. But there are also a host of engineers who do more sort of urban music or electronic music production, like R&B or hip-hop or house or techno, stuff that is sequenced for the most part. So there are some professionals who do sequencing. There's myself, and I do mostly studio recording and mixing. And we're open for business for all variety of clients. So I'm working with a solo singer-songwriter, female right now with a live band. And we're also working on hip-hop projects, and I'm working on a new sort of urban music project. So a wide variety of different clients, and we really aspire to pull in as many people as we can. Here we are at the rack of gear, and the centerpiece of any rack of gear is the patch bay, which connects all the devices in the studio. So we have a Switchcraft set of 96-point tiny telephone patch bay with D-sub connections on the back. So there's no sort of soldering going on. It's all very sturdy connections. And the beauty of all this gear, in my mind, is that you can access this gear while remaining in the monitoring position. So you can work from the console, turn around, and you're right here at your preamp, which is where you would want to be if you were changing the level or equalizing something. It makes sense to be in the middle of the speakers while doing that. So we designed this patch bay so that you wouldn't have to run about the studio to change levels and come back and see how it sounds. You can stay put, basically. There's nothing that would make you get up out of your seat, which is what I really like about the studio. The nicer gear that we have here would include the Chandler LTD1 preamp equalizer strip here, which is a high-quality tube preamp processor. And this is a pair of preamps called the TG2 that Chandler makes. So we have some really clean input channels here. We also have some real nice compressors. The MC77 by Purple is basically a emulation of the famous 1176 compressor. So anyone who's used the Universal Audio 1176 compressor will know exactly how this thing works. It's basically the exact same thing, except it's purple. Okay. Then we have a pair of DBX 160As, which is like peanut butter and jelly for a studio. You must have those. And 266XL, which is sort of a step down from the 160A. But it's a decent group of compressors. And of course we have a couple of board compressors and a whole host of plugins. Over here on the left, most bay, we have our time-based processors. First and foremost, the PCM91 by Lexicon, which gives you a tremendous selection of halls and plates and rooms and all sorts of ambient, interesting effects, chorusing and harmonizing and things like that. Then a TC Electronics M1, which most of you may know about. It's probably the most highly sort of commonly found multi-effects processor. It's not the top of the line, but it has just about every type of multi-effects processing that you can have. So you can connect all your different internal effects any way you'd like, and you can see here right now we're set up for a warm hall or a vocal plate. So there's a ton of reverbs in there. These devices here are more of the DJ variety. They're made by a company called Electrix, and we have a MoFX and a filter factory. And these do really interesting flanging and modulating, and they just really sort of mess up your sounds in incredibly weird ways, which is good because you don't want to just have these sort of standard studio effects. Sometimes you want to do something crazy that's hard to explain, and that's what these devices do. They do these sorts of weirdo things, all right, which is good. So sometimes I mess with these and I don't even know what I'm doing. All right? I just continue to fool around until something crazy happens. With all my training, I still like to just fool around. Then we have a Filter Pro by Line 6, which is basically a good collection of your basic sort of time-based signal processing. Over to our Pro Tools interfaces. Here we have our converters and our time clock. So we have an Apogee Big Ben master time clock, which it provides synchronization for any of the devices in the studio, and it functions as the master clock for Pro Tools. And then we have a pair of the top-of-the-line Pro Tools hardware interfaces called the 192 box, which means that this device can sample at 192 kilohertz. So it gives us an adequate amount of inputs and outputs for us to record a band. We can do 16 mics and 24 outputs, so it's fully functional. And then we have an Intel-based Macintosh, which runs Pro Tools and has a host of plugins from Sony to the Filter Factory stuff and Waves Bundle, etc. So we finally got all the gear all hooked up, and we are loving it. And I'm not really big on oodles and boodles of outboard gear. Even though I work for GearWire.com, you might think that I'm like totally about boutique-y effects, and I have to have this particular compressor or that particular equalizer. For me, it's kind of a moot point. I concentrate on the console and the microphones far more than I do on what's in the rack. That's all for mixing for me. I don't go through a lot of gear while I'm recording. I'm actually trying to be more like minimalistic. Get a good sound out of your amp, use the right kind of microphone, and then after that, all you're really trying to do is not F it up. So there's enough stuff there for someone like me to really get down and dirty.